Introducing our speakers for the night. We are the Road Socialist Organization. My name is Chris Carpio, and we'll be presenting tonight about our approach to this year's presidential elections and the road ahead, Harris or Trump, right? Or so that's how things are posed. We're a revolutionary organization trying to build a party in the United States. We want to bring change that will last and to build a new world out of the ashes of the old. That is our role. We don't think that reformism is the answer. We want to build revolution. And if you're on this call tonight, we hope that's what you want as well. Um, and then I'll introduce our speakers are going to be Nazak Sankari, Fernando Figueroa, and Sydney Loving will present for us tonight. And here we have Andy Koch, who will be handling the running of the call and also help with moderating, and is also from the Road Socialist Organization. And then before we turn it over to our speakers, what we'll do is we'll have our speakers present, and then we'll have question and answer. Before we go ahead and do that, though, I'll say a few words to make clear what our organization's line is, and hopefully people saw on our website and in Fight Back News what our position is, because we released that statement briefly. Our line is that this year, the system has produced two rotten candidates, neither of whom deserve our support. We cannot support the candidate from the team and the party that has been carrying out the genocide of the Palestinian people. We don't think the two candidates and the two parties are the same. So we don't think that that's true, that the Democrats and the Republicans are the same. We do think that they are different on different issues. But the question of Palestine has united peoples around the whole world against U.S. imperialism, our shared enemy, and their lackey Israel. Like literally, the UN walking out against Netanyahu speaking, like very, very clear for the world to see. So the question of Palestine, in our opinion, is the most important question in the world today. Our organization actually has scientific criteria for determining our relationship to the elections and the electoral candidates, and you'll hear our speakers talk about what that criteria is. And overall, the approach that we try to take, and I'm taking this right out of our statement, is we look at the issue of elections from the overall perspective of how we can build the most favorable terrain to fight on and to build revolutionary organization. That is how we approach the elections. So in a nutshell, this year we are not voting for Kamala Harris and we are not voting for Donald Trump. So with that, I will go ahead and I'll turn things over to Nazak Sankari, who is the co-chair of the current co-chair of the Chicago chapter of the U.S. Palestinian Community Network, a grassroots organization all across the U.S. So go ahead, Nazak, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Chrisley. Thank you so much for having me. I am Nazak from US PCN in Chicago. So we are over a year into this genocide, and we're still witnessing the most barbaric atrocities against our people in Palestine, funded unequivocally and supported unequivocally by the US. Over 43,000 are dead, probably tens of thousands more who are under the rubble, who indirectly have died or will die from the genocide, and hundreds of thousands are injured, and almost 2 million people have been displaced. So the US has supplied bombs to raze entire buildings to the ground in Lebanon, and today in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza, at least 109 people were killed. So yesterday, at least 60 people were killed in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, and the Israelis are using the same tactics, language, and propaganda to expand their genocidal tendencies into a broader regional war as they target Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Iran. And this is happening with the blessings and the weapons of the US with our tax dollars. And this leads me into the reflections for today's topic of the election and what approach we as people of conscience can take in the next week. So we know what a Trump presidency represents and the real repercussions and its impacts on all of our communities. That does not mean, however, we can ignore the daily atrocities executed with the blessings and the weapons from the Biden administration, of which Harris is in leadership. They believe that we will accept their feigned apologies and empty promises. And we know we don't have to sacrifice our integrity, our humanity, for crumbs of our rights. Harris has had multiple opportunities and has completely disregarded and insulted our community. At a rally in Michigan a few days ago, after someone disrupted her with chants of ending the war in Gaza, she responded, "On the topic of Gaza, we must end that war. End the war and bring the hostages home. But right now, I'm speaking about 2024. That's a direct quote. And with this, she's telling us she's not going to be any different. Palestine is an afterthought. And the majority of the Democrats believe that they can just say it's a problem to be dealt with later. But like we did at the DNC, where we ensured the whole world was watching and uplifted Palestine, we will continue to do so in all of our calls until the genocide is ended, unrestricted humanitarian aid is allowed in, and Palestine is liberated from the river to the sea. And we know if Harris was to win, she would be no different than the current administration. She will not support an arms embargo, will continue to uphold Israel's right to defend itself, and will provide aid and weapons to the war criminals. And I want to be very clear about our position. Her presidency will be no different because she has actively told us what to expect. She's moving further to the center in attempts to appease the conservative right and has been condescending to our communities, completely disregarding and insulting Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims, and other supporters of Palestinian rights, like many of you here tonight, over the last year, especially since she's become the nominee. And it's important to discuss all of this in the context of ideology as well. She and the Democratic Party unequivocally support Israel and this genocide because they are US imperialists, just like the Republicans are. No different. They all support Israel because that racist, apartheid, Zionist entity was manufactured by the British and US imperialism 8 decades ago, and is there only because it's a white European settler colonialist vassal state that does the bidding of the US and secures US economic interest in the region. It doesn't matter if it's Harris or Obama, and if either of them have a bit more empathy for murdered children than Biden or Trump. They're not going to change their line on policies for Israel, Palestine, or the entire Middle East because they are the same disgusting imperialists who have lived in the White House for over 100 years. The Democrats keep using the line that the foundation of democracy is at stake and will be saved under Harris. And this democracy that they cling to, founded on genocide, enslavement, forced displacement, is still perpetrating and funding a genocide and massacres in multiple countries daily. It's a slap in the face to not only us as Arabs, but marginalized and oppressed communities in general, to tell us that reproductive rights, healthcare, housing, and environmental justice come at the cost of a genocide. And for those that are as disillusioned as I encourage you to remember that this is not a single issue voting concern. Palestine is a reproductive justice issue. Palestine is an environmental justice issue, a labor issue, an LGBTQ plus issue. Palestine has galvanized and inspired people's movements across the country and the globe because it's a cause for all the oppressed, the colonized, and for anyone who refuses to accept anything less than national, social, and economic liberation. It's our duty here in the US to mobilize, organize, and protest regardless of who wins the election, because none of the elected officials who claim to represent us should be allowed any peace and quiet while they're complicit in genocide. We must continue to uplift the demand of no business as usual for politicians, institutions, and universities, and hold them accountable for their complicity in mass murders and genocide. If Harris and the Democrats lose, Palestinians and our supporters will absolutely reject any blame. The fault will only be on Harris and her party. They made a massive mistake even as US imperialists. They only needed to pull on Netanyahu's leash just a tiny bit, and they refused to do that because they want Israel to attack the Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Iraqi, and the Yemeni resistance. And of course, they want Israel to continuously threaten Iran. And lastly, the apartheid, settler colonial terrorist state of Israel knows that its existence is growing shorter as a racist apartheid state. So it's trying to inflict the largest amount of casualties as it's brought down. Israel and the West have disregarded all human rights and any semblance of international law, but they will never, and I repeat, they will never break the spirit of the Palestinian people or their steadfastness in the fight for justice and liberation. We know a free Palestine will be a blow to the US empire and help other oppressed people win their own freedoms as well. And we will continue to fight until every single inch of Palestine and all colonized Arab lands are free from the river to the sea.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nazik, for that very powerful presentation. And yeah, just a reminder that all Biden and Harris had to do was listen to the protests, listen to the poll results, look around them, and decide not to fund and enable this genocide anymore. And they've refused to do it and still are refusing to do it even as the war expands, because they are the ones doing it, right? So thank you so much, Nazik. Next, we'll have Fernando Figueroa of the Standing Committee of the Central Committee of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, one of our own leaders, to talk more about our line. Go ahead, Fern.
Hey, thank you so much. Like Chrisley said, I'm Fern. I'm a member of the Central Committee of Freedom Road Socialist Organization. My nationality is Cuban and Ecuadorian, and I use he, him pronouns. I live here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I've worked as a Teamster in a large warehouse for the past 12 years. Before becoming active in the labor movement, I did a little bit of community organizing in Jacksonville, and before that, I was a student organizer with SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, at the University of Florida. So since becoming politically active, I've seen a number of really wild presidential races. And in fact, I was one of the main organizers of the 2012 March on the RNC down in Tampa, Florida. And I've got to say, and I bet everybody on this call can agree with me, this has got to be one of the most, if not the most, disappointing set of choices the rotten system of American monopoly capitalism has ever offered us. On the one hand, of course, we've got the possible return of Trump and all his backwardness to office. On the other hand, we've got Harris and the deadly legacy of her administration regarding Palestine. And truly, the people of the United States and oppressed peoples around the world have been presented with terrible options under the decaying system of imperialism. So FRSO is an organization of revolutionaries because we don't believe that we can vote our way to socialism. However, Lenin reminds us that elections are an arena of struggle for the people, and it's an arena which Reds have engaged with for over a century. As such, Freedom Road Socialist Organization does not favor abstentionism. We look for the most favorable terrain to fight on and build revolutionary struggle and organization. So when analyzing the current political landscape, we take four important questions into consideration. What are the questions? One, we analyze whether one of the candidates is a special danger. Two, we ask if the election is a referendum on a major social question like a war or economic crisis. Three, we look at the election and for campaigns that reflect the national movements. And four, we analyze whether there's significant political action that's independent of the two dominant parties in the U.S., the Democrats and the Republicans. So we take those into consideration, and our Central Committee agreed that this election in 2024 is a referendum on the genocide in Palestine, which is currently being funded and facilitated by Harris and Biden. The members and cadre of Freedom Road are proletarian internationalists, and support for liberation struggles around the world is a core part of our history and who we are today. We recognize that the resistance to Israeli apartheid is a major component of the revolutionary process that will one day take down US imperialism and end it for good. A terrible reactionary like Trump does not deserve our vote, but neither does Harris because of the broadening war in Palestine and the Middle East. Now, that doesn't mean that Trump and Harris are the same. There are issues where they differ, like on the issue of trade union rights and rights for women. They are a little bit different. But in the end, we sum up the various aspects of the election and conclude that primarily in this election, imperialism is a broken system that cannot be repaired, must be swept away. And this election at its core is a referendum on Palestine. As proletarian internationalists, we cannot forget that for one moment. And we cannot forget that the criteria that we use to analyze these elections is not always even. The questions are not always carrying an even weight. And so that's the view of our Central Committee in Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fern. And 100% agreed that the criteria is not even. In fact, it's never even. There's always one that's primary, and that is Palestine today. Absolutely. So next we will go to Sydney Loving, who is also on the standing committee of the Central Committee of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, another one of our national leaders, and also the co-chair or a co-chair of the African American Commission. You want to take it away, Sid?
Hi everybody. I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little scratchy. So bear with me on that. But yes, I'm Sydney Loving, and my background in organizing is in the Black Liberation Movement and the fight against police crime. So I'm talking from that perspective too. And we have a long history in the Black Liberation Movement of solidarity um, with with Palestine, because we recognize the interconnected ways that national oppression is carried out. So, like Fern laid out, our line is a scientific analysis of what the forces are. Not what we think things could be, or any of that, but what is actually happening in this moment. And we work in a united front with other forces and ideologies, and within that we put forth our views. So we have folks in the Black Liberation Movement, different demographics that have different views on this than us, right? And we also, like the comrade said before, we're not saying that there's no difference between the parties. We understand they're both parties of the ruling class, both parties of the monopoly capitalists, but to say they're the same on all the issues, they're not. Another thing is, people will bring up the domestic issues, and so it bears saying that we're not ignoring that, and on these critical areas of the people's struggle, we are there and we have been there. And in many areas, we're on the front lines, and we're going to continue to fight on the front lines, in the labor movement, in the student movement, standing up against war and against repression on campuses, in the Black Liberation Movement, in the fight against police crimes, in women's liberation and LGBTQ liberation, environmental rights. We're there, and we're going to stay there and fight shoulder to shoulder. But we're not going to accept these crap choices. Our red line, our line in the sand, is genocide. And if we don't hold the Democrats to task on this, what could we possibly hold them to task on? So I will say too, in the Black Liberation Movement elections, and Fern kind of laid out that we don't typically have we don't have an on principle an abstentionist position, and in the Black Liberation Movement, elections and voting rights have a particular importance, and we've seen this, fighting against voter suppression of Black people in the South, which is part of a larger, project of national oppression and disenfranchising Black people and boxing us out of political power. So we are not at all blind to that, but we also recognize as revolutionaries the key position that this genocidal war holds in terms of propping up U.S. empire in the Middle East, and the demand is to stop the war. And we recognize the critical position that has in this election, and so we're not backing down from that. We're saying that the policy in terms of the Biden administration is completely wrong, is completely complicit in the genocidal war. And that when it comes to that issue, there's really not a shade of difference between Kamala and Biden. They're united on that. They've shown that. And the main demand that we're making as a movement is that all the aid, military and financial aid to Israel stop now. And we have to make that demand on Kamala Harris and Biden. The Democrats have to do this. And when people ask us, how are you going to vote by election time, it comes down to that, the question of voting for Kamala as the lesser of two evils, and this the either we're bluffing or we're not, and we're not voting for genocide. So you know there's an argument that comes sometimes, that this kind of position will be at fault if Trump wins, right? And that kind of raises a question for me: is it a fringe position, or is it the deciding factor in the election? Because it can't be both. Um, but what we're saying is that if the Democrats don't correct this and don't stop the genocidal war, then they have to be held responsible for losing the election, and the blame goes nowhere else. They have us pointing the finger at each other when the finger is pointed on them. And what we're demanding is what most of the American people want. Poll after poll supports that, an arms embargo to not be in this war. Most of the Black community does not want to be in this war. And we don't have another position to fight from other than to press that demand. And, how people have responded to this, a lot of the people in our areas of work in the Black liberation movement are totally united with us on that demand. Even ones who are going a different way in the voting booth, they're still uniting with us on the demand to end this war now. So we have to push that at the forefront. And like I said before, we're going to continue to fight in all these areas of the people's struggle as well, but we're not backing down on solidarity with Palestine.
Thank you so much for those words, Sid, and for laying down the law as far as what is the red line, how far can the Democrats go before they can stop holding the vote hostage or whatever. And I think, this is it. And now we'll go ahead and open it up to question and answer. I think before we do that, I want to just kind of keep bringing back something that our speakers already said, but it's important, is the criteria that we do use to determine how to relate to the candidates. There are 4, and it's in our statement. So if people want to pull that up, but there are 4: is a candidate, special danger, is the election a referendum on a major social question such as a war or economic crisis, is a candidate an expression of the national movements, right, taking political power, and is there a significant political action happening that's independent of the capitalist parties that we have to relate to. Ooh, let me just fix my turn off this blurriness. Okay. And we do think that one of the criteria is met in that this election is a referendum on the issue of Palestine. And I think the masses have made that very clear in various ways, whether it was the uncommitted movement or presence at protests, right? So now let's go ahead and open it up to question and answer. Please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question for a panelist, or, if any panelists can answer. It's just easier to keep track of that than in the chat, which is moving quickly. Yes, go ahead. Musa Bey. I'll unmute you.
Yes, I have a question. So Musa from Philadelphia. Was this also the same platform that the party had in 2020 when when the George Floyd uprisings were happening?
All right, thank you for that question, Musa. Who wants to answer it? What was our line in 2020? Yeah, Fern.
Yeah, just to go ahead and answer, if I recall correctly, our line in 2020 was to defeat Trump. And that was based on an analysis at that time of the four criteria and how they played into U.S. politics at the time. So that's actually different from our position today in the 2024 election, which is that neither of these two rotten candidates deserve our support or our vote.
Right. And just to jump in, and that's different because of the key position that the war in Palestine holds, right? So that's what has you know shifted our analysis to make that our line. And it also interestingly, in 2020, during the George Floyd rebellion, Biden was kind of using the police brutality of Trump as a galvanizing tool to get, Black people engaged in the process. And there's been maybe one instance of, police brutality and that from Harris, I think around Sonia Massey, but she's definitely not leading with justice for police crimes. Just an interesting little thing there, but absolutely, like Fern said, it was a different analysis for sure.
All right. Thank you to our speakers. We've got some more hands. I'll just go in the order that I seen them on the screen. Let's go to Liam.
Hi, I'm Liam from Detroit, FRSO. What is the general consensus on the candidates Jill Stein and Claudia de la Cruz?
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Fern. We think that there's a lot of interesting third-party candidates in this election. PSL is an interesting candidate. Jill Stein is an interesting candidate. I would add like Cornel West to the list. And we think it's a good thing that these folks are running. We do, however, take a materialist approach and say the unfortunate reality of U.S. politics is that we don't think at this time that any third party candidate's going to win the election. But we do understand that many of our friends, many of our forces feel strongly about these third party candidates. And indeed, some of them do represent good and valuable ideas and progressive thought within the movement. However, our main message revolves around emphasizing to the people the rotten nature of the two major candidates, the two candidates that are certainly one or the other is going to win the U.S. presidential election in a week.
All right. Thank you, Fern. Do any other panelists want to add to that in any way? Not, we can keep it moving. All right, let's go to Drusy. Oh, I don't know if you're speaking, Drusy. Can't hear anything. Maybe your audio. Yeah, try, if you raise your hand later, we'll call on you, and you can even try the chat as well. Okay, so for now, let's go to Jennifer.
Hello. I'm with Jen. My name is Terrence. Your statement that says, well, there's no doubt that Trump is a racist reactionary fool. We do not think he will rule by open terror, which is the essence of what fascism is. Could you go more in depth with that, of why you disagree that Trump would not enact fascism? Hello.
All
Hello.
right, great question. Hi, Terrence. All right. Sid for Nozick. Why does our statement say that? Oh, and it looks like this was Druzy's question as well. Excellent. Yeah, Fern.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer, and then maybe one of the other panels can answer the next one. so in our opinion, fascism represents a very specific, uh, you know, political circumstances that, frankly, the bourgeoisie of like America today don't need to rule by fascism. In fact, it's very clear that they don't desire to rule by fascism. They prefer this liberal democratic system they have set up. Fascism being like the open, terror riddled rule by violence. So, for example, like our own organization under like a fascist government would be completely outlawed. This meeting would be, subject to getting people arrested and executed, and we would be preparing to move our struggles underground. And if we believe that, Trump represented a fascist danger, uh, the Marxist-Leninist view of what to do in those situations is pretty consistent throughout history, and it's to throw all our weight behind the liberal democratic forces, in this case, the Democratic Party. And we don't think that Trump actually needs fascism to rule, nor does the current bourgeois um, system, favor such an approach. They favor the liberal democratic approach they have now. That doesn't mean there is no violence, because we understand that, the state is largely organized of armed bodies of men that carry out violence to promote the ruling of the class, right? To promote the ruling of the 1%. But at the end of the day, we don't see Trump as ruling through open terror and setting up, concentration camps like we saw in Nazi Germany. And in fact, we already had 4 years of Trump, and they were terrible, and he's a reactionary piece of trash. But we don't view him as representing fascism, or ready to enact fascism and start ruling by open terror in the streets, um, as backwards as he is and as terrible as he is.
Thank you, Fern. Go ahead, Sid. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, about, looking at, having a concrete analysis of what the conditions are of fascism are, and what um, would be in place for that to be the case. Um, and then also to say it will take more than voting for Democrats to safeguard against fascism, especially with the move towards the right and the concessions that the Democrats continue to make on these critical issues. In to keep to safeguard against fascism, we have to build up the strength of the people's movements, and build a new communist party, which we're working to do, and we have to keep the advance with us to do that, which we can't do if we vote for genocide. But yeah, agree with what Fern said. um, you know, there's a level of stability that bourgeois democracy provides a capitalist state, um, which includes kind of the illusion of choice and political freedom, to kind of keep uprisings down, and containing revolutionary activity and all of that, and also that fascism um, only becomes necessary when the capitalist control is critically severely threatened by revolutionary movements. So
Yeah, I want to go ahead and add on to what the panelists are saying too, is they'll use the open terror means when these current means no longer work for them, right? When these courts are no longer sufficient, when they can no longer, use the university administrators to, use the police to ban the students from the schools, right? And in fact, when the last time we were raided by the FBI was under Obama's administration. So, that goes to show that kind of the situation as it is right now, like Fern said, if we thought there was as huge of a revolutionary movement right now that would put the bourgeoisie in a position where they would use that open terror, and that was actually happening, we would change our organizing to reflect that. We would take it very seriously. And that's just not what's happening right now in our analysis. But great job to the panelists. And I will go ahead back to the hands now. We'll go to Jackie. Nope. Where'd they go? Okay. They may have dropped off and maybe we'll be back. So we'll just go now to Jared.
Hi, this is Jared from Chicago. I just wanted to ask specifically about national strategy for power building. Just like to give a look into that.
Ah, strategy question. How can we build what we're trying to build?
If this is Fern, if it's like a reference to, our overall strategy for building revolution, in FRSO, we seek to build a united front against monopoly capitalism. The united front includes anybody and everybody that we can unite against this terrible, rotten reactionary system. And at the core of that united front, we have what we call the strategic alliance, which is an alliance between the multinational working class on the one hand and the oppressed nations on the other, led by the party of the proletariat, which we hope to aspire to one day be. We consider ourselves a pre-party organization that one day, believes that we can be the party that represents the working class in this country. But ultimately, what this looks like is all our community organizations, student organizations, trade union movements, working together in a united front against things like the genocide in Palestine, against things like the police crimes that are going on left and right in all of our cities, against economic injustice, against the oppression of women. But uniting different forces to fight back on practical day-to-day levels. We often say in the organization that changes in the streets. We encourage people to get active, to organize in their communities, to organize in their trade unions, on their college campuses. And ultimately, we encourage people to become members and cadre of Freedom Road Socialist Organization, because we believe that a democratic centralist party like ours can help unite these different forces and lead the people's struggles to strike blows against the enemy and to win victories wherever possible.
Yeah, just to jump in and add a little to that, all those areas um of struggle that Fern mentioned, like we take it very seriously, being active and not sitting on the sidelines, but working within all of those movements to like Fern said, to win everything that we can win, because for a number of reasons, not only because we want to create better terrain to fight on, but also those wins show ourselves and show the masses of people that we actually do have power. We do have collective power. And we want to raise the level of organization so that we're more effective. And we want to, through those struggles, win the advance, meaning the people who are active in the struggle to change things. We want to understand and see the real face of the enemy in those struggles, and win those active elements, the advance over to revolutionary organization, and seeing that if we really want to put an end to all exploitation, we have to put an end to monopoly capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. The strategy is the united front against U.S. imperialism, against whom a massive blow is being dealt by the people of Palestine and the Arab world in the resistance. And that is who, that's the center of gravity in the world today. We'll go to Jackie R. now that they've dealt with their tech problem. Go ahead, Jackie. Oh, okay, we couldn't hear you. I don't know if there's a way you can fix your audio. No, I think they're unmuted. Okay, if you want to write it in the chat, we'll make sure that the panelists can get to it, okay? No worries, no need to apologize. All right, so we'll get to it once the next question is done and it's in the chat. Okay, so now let's go to Leo.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I guess I kind of have like a two-part question. And the first part is, I guess, like sort of a comment about the political climate lately. I feel like for the last like 8 years, it's gotten kind of crazy in terms of the way that the rhetoric surrounding the election has been from the Democrats. It's like they're all hyped up about this like alleged Russian interference and saying that Trump is Putin's candidate and that Putin worked really hard to get him into the White House or whatever. And then also with like the Republicans, a lot of the Republicans believing that the election is rigged against them with and then the riots that took place in like 2017. I just feel like it's been a really crazy, like there's been a lot of crazy rhetoric from both sides about the legitimacy of US elections, and I'm wondering if anyone has an analysis on that. And then my second question is how, like, it's related to that, which is when I talk about the United States' role in the war in Ukraine, for example, or in Syria, or various or even talking about like the visit that Trump. I mean, I know a lot of like liberal or like left-leaning liberals, that want to feel like they're socialists, that they it's like if you talk about the war in Ukraine, people think that you are like brainwashed by Putin nowadays, or that you're like secretly a rightist. And I'm just wondering if anyone has any commentary on like how to deal with that, because that's a piece of the political climate that I feel like the last 8 years, it's just gotten really, really, really polarized in a way where it's like, if you try to, I don't know, like, it's like both sides of the quote unquote, like legitimate political spectrum seem to think that the election is not legitimate. But then if you come in and say, it's never really been that legitimate because they're both capitalist parties, then they think that you're like a real life Putin bot. I don't know. I also agree with Charles. I'm not pro Putin. I'm anti NATO, but nobody believes me when I say that. So I'm just wondering if anyone has anything to say about that kind of dynamic of, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a great question, Leo, because we actually do have an analysis on that, on what you're describing. Sid, I saw your hand go up.
Oh yeah, I just want to say, I mean, the polarization is definitely increasing, and I also see, we always talk about how empire is declining and that decline is accelerating. And so one of the signs of the accelerating decline of empire I would see is this kind of like the what you're talking about in terms of the legitimacy of elections. And these things come up less and more and differently in different areas of work, but and maybe, you know, Fern has more to say about that, but you know, I don't get into every argument with every person. Many some things can be struggled over, you know, but some things are best struggled over, you know, when they're actually relevant to our work, and when we're fighting like shoulder to shoulder with people, then they can kind of trust what our politics are and be more open to our ideas. But I definitely feel you on that.
Yeah, Fern.
Yeah, I think that's a great analysis. You know, to me, when I hear that, it really speaks to it's like a symptom of the crumbling U.S. imperialist system that, you know, people living in this country are so ready to question the legitimacy of our, you know, democracy, of our system, in a way that when I got started organizing 15 years ago, would have seemed completely absurd. You know, I never heard these arguments uh, you know, back in 2008 when I was like a college student organizing on campus. But today it's almost like commonplace, right? So we do have a view, an analysis of Russia. The last time we did an analysis a couple of years ago at one of our congresses, uh, we analyzed it as an emerging imperialist power, one that's in competition with the imperialist powers in this country. And you see this manifested in things like the funding that the U.S. empire is sending to the Ukraine to fight Russia. You see it manifested in other ways too, especially with trade agreements and whatnot. Ultimately, though, uh, this is the United States of America. This is the country that interferes in other elections around the world. And it's done so, you know, I don't know, I'm sure there's a number out there, but it seems like a countless number of times that US imperialists have interfered in elections around the world. And I think it's uh, somewhat ironic that there are people out there who think that our elections are being interfered with when really, you know, it's the United States interfering with elections all over the world. Um, so I just think it's kind of ironic in a way.
Yeah, 100%. The situation of the accelerating decline of U.S. imperialism means it's harder for the U.S. to maintain its empire. It's not on the ascendancy anymore. And you even have, you know, other capitalists like Trump, you know, opportunistically rejecting the Trans-Pacific Partnership and things like that, right? And now you have, you know, the mask slipping off of the imperialist election denialism every time anyone gets elected now, right? So it's harder and harder to keep the mask on. Okay, let's go next to Farzine.
So I don't know if anyone will be able to answer my question because there's a really strange thing that's going on. So in my area, we're in the Chicago area. I'm very involved with the pro-Palestine movement, and that, of course, tends to be very affiliated with mosques in the areas. So there is the current Democratic candidate, Sean Casten, and he is a rabid Zionist. Like refuses. Like I've tried to talk to him, and he runs the other way if he sees me. I do have a keffiyeh, so it's not that he actually recognizes my face. It's the keffiyeh. But either way, he's, you know, obviously not an ally. And the mosque, in like one of these mosques, invited a bunch of candidates to come. They invited Sean Casten and they invited his opponent, who is a right winger. The right winger not only agreed to come speak to the Muslims, but she also acknowledged the 1 year anniversary of the Orthodox Church being bombed in Gaza. So all of the Muslims are saying, okay, well, Sean Casten only has a 7% lead, so let's just all vote for this Republican and put a right winger in charge because she's actually representing us. And I feel like I can't understand how anyone is supposed to navigate that, right? Like, do we do the accelerationist of like yeah, okay, fine, this right winger is at least kind of listening to us, even though she's a crazy person. And like, do we punish Sean Casten like that?
All right. Thank you for your very interesting question, Farzine. We actually do have among our panelists someone who is in the Palestine movement in Chicago. Nazik, do you have thoughts?
So we've been targeting Sean Casten for a year. He he and his toe-shaped face have hidden, I think, out of the public sphere because of how much we have been targeting him. We have gone to his office. We held a sit-in there. He refused to meet with us. We went outside of his house. We have shut down almost every single in-person event that he had, and virtual event that he stopped holding those events because he was so scared that we would show up and disrupt him. So he's coming out of the woodwork again, right? During these like next few weeks. To your question, it's a really hard thing that we've been working with within our community. That, you know, someone said, where did someone say it in the chat? I'm trying to think. Worse, not better. I think that was Joe. I don't know if that was in in relation to this. But it's like I said earlier, this is not a singular like item for our votes, right? Like Palestine is an intersectional piece. And so it's reproductive justice, it's environmental justice, it's LGBTQ plus rights. It's an immigrant rights issue. So it's all of these things as we are trying to think of how we are moving forward in holding these politicians accountable. And so Casten is what we call a PEP, Progressive Except on Palestine. We unfortunately have a lot of them in Illinois and Chicago. And I think the way that we have to continue doing it is by exposing him as well as any of the other ones, because we know that the folks on the right are going to be significantly worse. And we know what their stance is, how we can still hold them accountable. They're giving us the bare minimum of saying, oh yeah, you know, Orthodox Church was bombed. That's sad. That doesn't mean shit. How have they showed up for us as a whole over the last year? They haven't. And so, you know, we don't need to accept the bare minimum. And I think it's our duty to continue to hold these, whether progressives except on Palestine accountable, or, you know, anyone else that says they represent us or want to represent us. We hold them accountable regardless of party.
Awesome. Thank you
Sorry,
so
that was
much.
long-winded.
No, that was great. That was a, you know, it was a tricky question. You gave a great answer. Thank you so much for that. All right, I think we have Jackie's question in the chat now. Given the stage of struggle we are in, how do we best combat the current common rhetoric used to ward people away from revolutionary action or even political activity that isn't voting as a whole? Essentially, liberal and fascist lines on what's going on in Palestine seems like a matter of common sense to liberals, even among the working class and most vulnerable people's rhetoric, like votes not for Harris or votes for Trump. Third parties are a waste of time, and other notions surrounding organizing. And socialist practice and how it is supposedly improper doesn't work, and other IDPOL related matters too, like pink washing, painting Kamala as someone who's better for women and black and brown folks. How do we combat this in a productive and revolutionary fashion? Should we even be engaging seeming committed liberals among the working class in these matters? Okay, what do panelists think? Yes, Sid.
Yeah, so, you know, I would, in terms of engaging with those arguments, I would be careful. It depends. Um, you know, kind of like I said before, people come to, you know, trust our politics and what we believe in because of what we do and because we're in the struggles, you know, for the things that they care about, because we care about them as well. And so that being, you know, fighting alongside somebody in a given area is a much better place to struggle over ideas with. I think that the ruling class would like nothing more, and the Democrats would like nothing more than for us to point the fingers at each other in an instance of their losses when the fingers is only at them. You know, if it would be if she won't stand up for ending aid to Israel, um, then they only have themselves to blame. You know, and also sometimes some of the people that are making those arguments actually don't even see eye to eye with us on this genocidal war, and they're actually Zionists. So I would watch that too. I do see some of that. And so we have nothing to argue with those folks about. You know, in terms of the identity politics stuff, I mean, like I said, we're in the Black liberation movement. We're in the women's liberation movement. Those struggles matter to us, and we're still saying that this is our red line. We're not voting for genocide. And you know, our experiences are varied, but by and large, people in the movements understand that position. So I
Yeah.
won't worry too much about it. They do it every year. You have to, you know, they in their view, the Democrats don't have to do anything to actually earn votes, which is uh which is not going to work.
All right. Thank you, Sid. Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Okay, we'll go now to, and so folks know these will be the hands that we will just have for the rest of the program due to time. But thanks for such a lively Q&A. Okay, we'll go next to Tom Burke.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm the organizational secretary for the FRSO. I'm wondering, what are we going to do the day after the election? Do you have opinions on who's going to win? And then, you know, what do we do the next morning when we wake up? We know the Israelis are going to still be committing a genocide and trying to expand a wider war. We know that the White House is stoking that fire, and maybe without the election as a burden, maybe they'll double down on some of it, like against Lebanon, for instance. I don't know. What do you think is going to happen, and what should we be doing?
Fern.
I think that's a great question, you know, because it relates to what kind of actions are we taking as an organization, as members, as cadre of this wonderful organization. And the short answer is get out in the streets and protest, get out in the communities and organize, uh, you know, protest demonstrations immediately following the elections. We want to be protesting uh, after the inauguration in January, but sooner than that, we want to, you know, be out in the streets, whether Trump wins, whether Harris wins. Both of them are rotten candidates, and we want to be out there organizing people to fight back and to keep trying to get change by taking action, by taking the streets. You know, we do view the elections as an arena of the people's struggle, but we don't view it as like the end all be all, and certainly not the end all be all of the revolutionary process. You know, earlier tonight we talked about our main strategy for revolution, organizing that united front. And, you know, whichever one of these terrible candidates wins, we can use that to our advantage to build that united front and to let folks know, like, we're against genocide in Palestine, we're against Trump's reactionary policies, and it's time to mobilize people and fight back against the terrible attacks that are sure to come on the people, regardless of who wins next week.
Yeah, absolutely, Fern. Protest the next day. If it's Harris, end U.S. aid to Israel, stand with Palestine. If it's Trump, stop Trump, his attacks on labor, women's and reproductive rights, and on Palestine, because he's terrible on that as well. Insists that Biden didn't do enough. Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Tom. Next, we'll go to Andrew.
Hey, yeah, so on the topic of elections, my question was, does Freedom Road see running candidates at any level, like either in a coalition or as an organization, as part of their strategy in the future? Maybe not necessarily for president, but at the local level or something like that.
Ooh, interesting question. Yeah, Fern.
I think it's definitely possible, especially down the line. We have a little bit of experience in recent years, a very small amount of experience with it in recent years. Um, and we analyzed the conditions that the Bolsheviks found themselves in back in the early part of the 20th century, where they were running candidates for various positions. We don't think that's our central focus now, and we don't think it's like just over the horizon. But I'm sure within my lifetime, if our organization continues to grow, continues to challenge the powers that be in the streets, uh, I could see it happening, absolutely. We certainly don't reject it out of some kind of principle, but it's not currently a major part of our strategy.
Yeah, Sid.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And typically, we could back a candidate, based on their policies, with regards to the struggle for community control, the police locally, or something like that. But yeah, I agree with Fern. I mean, um, it is definitely possible. Just depends on the conditions.
All right. Thanks so much. Unless anyone wants to add anything to that, we'll go next to Uriel.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, nice. Yeah. Um, regarding FRSO's line on the election and analysis, it's based on that the election is a referendum on the Palestinian genocide. I was wondering if there could be more said to that about how, with Marxism-Leninism, we view as a proletarian revolution occurring where imperialism is at its weakest. And I was wondering right now with the Palestinian resistance struggling in their national liberation, apart from the referendum on the Palestinian genocide, I wonder if there was more to be said about the Palestinian national liberation movement against imperialism, if there's more that FRSO analyze that with regards to this election and why we support Palestinian revolution right now?
Ooh. So our views on the resistance. Any views from any of the panelists? We definitely have them. Yeah, Fern.
Yeah, I definitely think, we 100% stand behind, victory to the Palestinian resistance. Um, I think the comrade that just spoke made a good point about imperialism breaking where the chains are the weakest. We definitely see like the height of world imperialism and all of its flaws and contradictions going on right now in Gaza and Palestine, in this broadening war that's affecting other parts of the Middle East. And we think that it plays a key role in the weakening of U.S. imperialism, because here you have what used to be considered the indefeatable behemoth of U.S. imperialism, throwing all of its funding uh, into the Israeli apartheid system, into propping it up uh, to squash the resistance. Yet the resistance is prevailing. They're struggling. They're still fighting. And this comes after half a decade of U.S. imperialism being defeated in Vietnam, in different countries throughout the Middle East, and just defeat after defeat after defeat. Here in 2024, we see the heroic resistance going on in Palestine as the harbinger of, uh, the eventual like Israeli defeat and U.S. defeat of the U.S. imperialist agenda in the Middle East. So we think it's in a very important, crucial component of the weakening imperialist system around the world. Um, I think it's a major turning point for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sid, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I just want to say that that's a big part of our position is, it's not just the understanding it as a genocidal war, but understanding Israel as a very important pillar of U.S. imperialism, because of its position as a you know um, maintaining U.S. dominance in the Middle East. And so, its role as that regional kind of military power, is that alliance that helps the U.S. Counterbalance and secure oil resources and all of that. And so, the Democrats are upholding that because of it, because of that strategic position, reinforcing the goals of U.S. empire.
Yeah, absolutely. Just think of the importance of oil. And in Fight Back News, we actually have an interview from 2009 with the imprisoned General Secretary of the PFLP, Ahmad Sadat. So we respect the Palestinian resistance greatly. We think everything happening there is heroic. Yeah, and people should read Fight Back News and, learn all about it, among Resistance News Network and other things. Okay, let's go to Eric. Oh, are you still there, Eric? Okay, we'll ask you to unmute one more time. If not, you might. Yeah, go ahead.
Alrighty. Eric from New Hampshire here. I'm just kind of wondering what the relationship that FRSO has with other socialist organizations, and what does the future look like in terms of organizing like a mass movement, considering we're all as socialists in these sort of different groups.
All right. What do the panelists think? Yes. Oh, I saw. We'll go Sid and then Fern, if you're okay with that, Fern.
Yeah, like we said earlier, we want to unite all who can be united, and unite in action in the different arenas of the people's struggle. Our main concern is organizing the masses, and organizing amongst the working class. So, that's what we do. But Fern, you can add on to that.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly. We want unity in action. We love working with anybody that wants to strike blows against the enemy. We certainly reject, sectarianism or anything like that. But we also don't believe in unity as like an abstract principle. We want it based in concrete conditions and campaigns that are going on the ground. In FRSO, we rely upon the mass line and the campaign method for organizing protests, demonstrations, campaigns in community, workplaces, campuses. And, we're happy to work with other like-minded folks, fellow travelers, other socialist folks on any of these campaigns where, we can reach a practical working unity. We think it's very positive.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Fern. And we'll go next to our last question of the night for a little goodbye. Isaiah.
All right. So my question was, should we be focused on organizing in rural areas or urban areas if we live in an urban area and still want to organize our community? Like that's something I'm struggling with right now, and I haven't really gotten started on anything, unfortunately.
So to clarify, do you live in a rural or an urban area?
Rural.
Rural. Okay, got you. All right. our approach to the role. Yeah, Fern.
Yeah, in general, we favor organizing where the biggest concentrations of people are in big cities. However, we do have comrades that work in cities of all sizes. And the important thing is to, tailor your expectations for the movement, based on the size of your community, the campus that you're organizing on, etc. We think that revolutionary organization can be built in any city, so long as you're following the principles of Marxism, Leninism. And, maybe in a city like LA or New York, you might get 1,000 or 10,000 people to come out to a protest. Maybe that's not a realistic goal in a city with a much smaller population size. But we think regardless of how small your area is, it's important to get out and organize. If you live in a small town, it's a great thing to get 20 people out on a street corner, or even 10 people out on a street corner holding signs, chanting for Palestinian liberation, etc. So we think that you have to build revolutionary organization in all kinds of cities. We're not going to get there with simply one or the other. You definitely want to be in all the places you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that our panelists want to add? All right. So if not, I think we have reached the end of our question and answer session. Thank you so much to everyone for being on here tonight. I hope people remember that we said if people do want to join in on the fight with us, get ready to organize protests for the day after, right? And the day after it's clear who the winner is, maybe, it might keep a lookout for things in Fight Back News. I'd also like to plug our newspaper, Fight Back News, where we release statements, and we will keep releasing statements and covering news and views from the People's Struggle. And people can write to it as well. Yeah, the link is in the chat. Join Freedom Road Socialist Organization so we can actually be in touch with you and talk to you about how to build these things and even build your own if you want to organize in your city and recruit Marxist-Leninists, will help you do that. And to also look into purchasing things that we've published and books that we've published, such as the works of Frank Chapman, his autobiography, but also Marxist-Leninist perspectives on Black liberation and socialism, and Revolutionary Science of Marxism-Leninism by Josh Sykes, also on our website, FRSO.org. So with that said, thanks so much to our speakers for tonight, Nazik, Fern, and Sid, and thanks to everyone who asked questions, and we'll see you in the streets. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.